I'm Mitchell Kors.
I'm Joel Cryer, and this is the history of commercial flight in the United States and around the world.
The history of commercial air flight and airplanes has a fairly long and interesting history.
It all started with the mail.
It was slow. Mail that went cross-country took days, and mail that had to go overseas was delayed by around a week by boat.
Before planes were used to deliver letters, they used balloons and airships, but the balloons often drifted off course, and airships were never seen as a good option either.
So once they started using airplanes, then what?
First airmail in the U.S. was delivered on Long Island in 1911 as an experiment. By 1918, it had expanded to regular service between New York City, Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia.
The city of brotherly love.
Right. At first, airmail was a function of the War Department because it was viewed as a training exercise.
That's good, because in practicality it wasn't an exercise. The planes couldn't fly at night, and at night the mail had to be loaded onto trains.
Not exactly a time saver. And just like today, when it came time to switch presidents, the people leading this new but worthy program feared budget cuts.
Unlike today, their solution was an audacious show of the program's value. They launched 4 planes, from New York to San Francisco, and 2 going the opposite way.
And as if to demonstrate why audacious displays are less common in government today, only one of the planes made it.
But it was the fastest cross-country airmail delivery ever at that time.
In 1925, the airmail took its next big step with the Kelly Act, which authorized the post office to give airmail routes to private contractors.
That meant big money for those with a plane and a will to succeed. Investments from the financial boom helped those early companies grow into names we still recognize today, like Boeing.
Then they started to carry people.
They started carrying human passengers for 2 reasons. One was fiscal.
Fiscal? That's underselling it. It's a story of national politics, big money, corruption!
Yeah. Either way, it had to do with this guy named Walter Folger Brown.
Exactly. He was the Postmaster General during the Hoover administration.
Now, Brown was working under a new law called the Mcnairy Waters Act of 1930, which gave him a lot of authority.
This included the ability to set how much the private mail carriers were paid.
Before Brown came to office, they were paid pretty well. So well, in fact, there was no real money in carrying people. To make the same profit as carrying mail, airlines would have to charge a 150-pound man over $1,000 to fly cross-country.
And did Walter Folger Brown rush in nobly to remedy this imbalance and bring air travel to the masses?
Not exactly.
Not exactly is right. Before Brown entered office, the airmail companies were paid per pound. He changed it to pay per unit volume and got a little cozy with a few companies in the process. In fact, Brown's use of his price-setting powers was so suspicious that the Senate launched an investigation in 1934.
They canceled the contracts and told the Army Air Corps to fly the mail. Bad idea.
The Army Air Corps did a remarkably bad job. Not only did they suffer several fatal crashes and a week-long shutdown of the entire airmail system, but they also cost 4 times as much as the private carriers did.
Understandably, the contracts were reinstated within 3 months, and they kept per-volume pricing. Suddenly, carrying people became financially attractive.
This meshed with the second reason, pent-up consumer demand for faster travel. With both supply and demand in place, people rushed to the airports, which created new problems.
One of the problems with scheduling long-distance flights was navigation. The planes had to fly relatively low, following coastlines or landmarks to get from point A to point B without getting lost.
Later they built bonfires to better navigate over land, with the goal of having a transcontinental airway.
But bonfires weren't overly practical, so they switched to large light beacons to form the highway. Also, during World War II, they perfected radar and began fitting planes with transponders so that they could track them from airport to airport.
They also established national air corridors so as to track planes throughout entire trips.
Today, the system is almost completely computerized, and authorities hope to have a satellite-based system called NextGen, fully operational soon.
Let's talk about the planes themselves.
Initially, any and every plane available was used for hauling passengers from place to place.
But then, certain types of planes, specifically built for accommodating many passengers, were built.
The Russian Sikorsky Ilya Muromets could hold 16 people. It had an isolated passenger saloon, bathroom, bedroom, wicker chairs, internal heating, and lighting. It was the first plane specifically designed to carry multiple passengers commercially.
Then came the Farman F-60 Goliath from 1919, which could seat up to 14 passengers. Around 60 were built.
The first all-metal passenger aircraft was the Junkers F-13. Also built in 1919, 322 were built.
The Ford Trimotor was also a very important early airliner. With 2 engines mounted on the wings, 1 in the nose, and a slab-sided body, it carried 8 passengers and was produced from 1925 to 1933.
Then came the Douglas DC-2 and later the DC-3. These planes were the first to be financially successful without the aid of government subsidy. That was huge.
After the success of the DC-2s and 3s, passenger planes started to be built with jet engines.
Up until now, all the planes were being built during World War II, either for military use or for some civil.
After the war, planes got considerably better.
Better meaning pressurized cabins. Have you ever gone up in a plane and experienced your ears popping? That was in a plane with a pressurized cabin that is perfected and standard.
Before that, the cabins were not pressurized. They were sealed against the outside air, sure, but the pressure would still drop considerably inside the cabin.
Then a company called Lockheed decided to solve this problem and came out with the Constellation.
It looked weird.
That's because it had 3 tails. Styling aside, this plane could go higher, faster, and farther than any other plane being built at the time. Unlike most of the current competition, it could also go across the Atlantic.
Enter Boeing.
Everyone knows Boeing is a gigantic company. Today they build the vast majority of commercial aircraft, including the iconic 747.
So what did they do to respond to the success of the Constellation?
They came up with a new aircraft. It was based on their previous model, the C-97 Stratofreighter, which was a military aircraft, and it was completely different from everything else being built at the time. They simply switched it from moving tanks to moving people.
Essentially the same thing, right?
Wrong. The 377 was a beautiful double-decker 100-passenger marvel of an airplane. They built 55. Now, up until this time, the industry was using a lot of aging DC-2s, 3s, and a few 4s, 5s, and even 6s.
They started using those after they fixed the small problems that were causing the planes to burst into flame mid-flight.
With these planes getting so old, Convair decided to make their move. They came out with the 240, 340, and 440 sequentially. Each had pressurized cabins and each held more passengers than the last. Convair also decided to upgrade the 440 with greatly improved soundproofing to the general thanks of the flying public.
After that, most planes that were built followed the same recipe.
Body, wings, and really big jet engines bolted to the wings.
Not all planes after that were run-of-the-mill, though. Can we pause for 1 second and look at possibly the weirdest looking airliner ever?
The Beluga?
The Beluga!
Fine.
Originally called the Airbus Super Freighter, everyone just called it the Beluga, and it caught on to the point where Airbus adopted the name.
And it looks like this.
And it flies! Its purpose is to transport really large and bulky cargo like airplane wings. It has a hatch that opens on top that can devour almost any size cargo. In this picture, the Beluga is going to eat an entire helicopter.
That is awesome.
So awesome. But they only built 5. They only built one before it too, and it had a much more awesome name.
It's the Super Guppy.
Well, that seems like a good place to end our strange little presentation.
Thanks for watching, and goodbye.